Hi, it's Nicole, and today I'm going to be doing my January wrap-up, which should be pretty short because I've only finished 2 books in January. The first book I finished I've actually talked a little bit about in a few videos now, and that was Emergent Strategy by Adrienne Maree Brown. This book looks at our response to change, and particularly at how we change our lives, our society, and our world for the better. A note that I didn't actually realize going into this book is I think it's more looking at group organizing and in a more formal structure. As it is inspired by the philosophies laid out in Octavia Butler's works, I thought it would be a good idea to familiarize myself a little bit more with Octavia Butler's work before heading into this one, so I picked up Parable of the Sower, and I finished that in the last few days of December, which is why I'm not featuring it in this video now, but I did do a full review on that book, and I'll link that in the description if you want to find out more about my thoughts on that. But overall, I quite enjoyed it, which made it a shame that I didn't really get on that well with Emergent Strategy. Overall, I would boil it down to not really getting on with this author's style of writing, because there were a few little things in Emergent Strategy that I thought were kind of interesting, but overall, I just don't think the book worked for me. That said, I feel like if you just read a sample or a few pages of this book in the bookshop or something, you'll probably get an idea whether or not it's something that you might get on with. So just because it didn't work for me doesn't mean it won't necessarily work for you, and I feel like we need as many people as possible on board. So like I said before, if she's able to talk to groups of people who get on with that kind of style and bring more people on board, then I am completely in favor of that. And the other book that I finished was Our Place by Mark Cocker. I actually own this as a physical book on my shelves, but I borrowed the audiobook from my library to get through it a little faster. I am not a particularly fast reader, and so my strategy to get through more of my physical books this year, which is one of my goals for the year, is to try to find audiobooks from my library for as many of the physical books that I own as possible, so I can kind of get through those more quickly than I otherwise would do, and then all of the books that I can't find an audiobook for, I'll spend dedicated time actually reading the physical book. This book essentially looks at nature in the UK, and I was very pleasantly surprised with this audiobook actually. It's read by the author and I found his style delightful. I love how wry his approach is. I can see how some people might find it boring potentially, the way that he speaks, but I found it very entertaining. I also felt like there was nothing wasted in what he was presenting. There are a few longer passages that are describing the scenery, but I think that helps to really anchor you in that place that he's about to talk about. You can more readily visualize the places that these political battles are happening over. I also like that he talked about some of the more counterintuitive aspects of nature conservation. For example, the fact that litter is an issue, but it's not nearly as important as people might think, which is not to say that we don't want to combat litter in nature, but it's just making the point that part of the reason that so many people get behind this anti-litter campaign in nature is partly because of problematic ideas that in order for nature to be good or healthy and so on, it needs to be tidy, and that idea in itself can be actually quite destructive and can actually encourage anti-biodiversity in a lot of ways. We see this when people try to tame their gardens and are keeping really short lawns and everything's all neat and tidy, but there's not really any biodiversity in those spaces. Another thing that he brings up that highlights this counterintuitivity about nature conservation is the idea that the public generally tends to be in favor of tree planting and against felling of trees. On the surface it seems great, but there are times when it's very important to fell trees, and there are also loads of times when planting trees can be more destructive than helpful. And it's this overly simplified idea of nature, what it is, how or whether we fit into it, which, I mean, we are obviously part of nature, but we tend to see ourselves as separate to it. Ideas around this struggle between industry and economy and nature, which is so insidious. And I think for me there was just a lot packed into this small book, and it just felt so informative. But I guess I also have this feeling whenever I come to books like this of being frustrated by how much of these details are so enlightening, but also that I know I won't be able to hang on to each little detail later. And when that happens, especially with a book that I already own, it makes me think I'm definitely going to keep that book because it's probably going to be something I'm going to want to reread in future, even if just to help me anchor some of the points that I didn't fully grasp the first time round, or to help me anchor some of those facts that I lose in trying to retell it to someone else. So this one was a real winner for me, and if you are interested in knowing more about the situation with nature in Britain, or about British nature charities and nature conservation organisations and the way that they interact with each other, the way that they sometimes cannibalize each other, the way that they can be antagonistic with each other, the way that they play off of each other, if you're interested in the conflict between nature and industry in this country, anything like that, this is an excellent book that touches on all of those things, and at the end there are a list of truths, I think he calls them, that we kind of have to reckon with, and ideas for bettering the situation that we're facing with the loss of biodiversity and the kind of loss of the countryside that we are seeing more and more at the hands of some very wealthy players in the game. So again, I would highly recommend this one, but it might also be a little bit niche, so you'll be able to tell if it's something that you want to pick up or not. I'm realizing that my nonfiction addiction is getting a little bit out of hand, even for me. It seems like most of the books on my physical shelves are nonfiction books, and that can be a little bit exhausting at a certain point, and this is that certain point. So next month, although I will be picking up Afropean, which is a nonfiction from my shelves, I also re-picked up Grey Bees in the last few days that I started reading, I think a few years ago now, and I was really enjoying it at the time. I don't remember why I had put it down, maybe because I was falling behind in the Invisible Cities read-along that I picked it up for, but I am enjoying that now that I've re-picked it up, and I'm enjoying being back in the fiction space, and so I think I'll probably pick up another fiction book next month as well, to help kind of balance out a lot of the sort of grim, political, informative nonfiction that is on my shelves that I've been trying to get through. I hope that you've read at least one excellent book in the month of January and that your reading year is off to a good start. But that's pretty much it for this January wrap up. I'll see you again next time. Bye.